Shalom, welcome to Rivkush, a CJN podcast featuring conversations with Jews of color discussing all things Jewish. My guest today is Brandy Shufutinsky, who is a social worker, writer, researcher, advocate. Brandy has worked towards advancing the rights of victims and survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault within the military community through practice, education, and research. Currently, her focus is on developing intercultural and academic opportunities to enhance liberal democratic ideals. So please join me in welcoming Brandy, who I think her bio actually doesn't tell you the depth of Brandy and the work that Brandy does. I am a super fan of Brandy. Initially, before I got to really see the work that you did, read your articles in the Times of Israel, see your incredible social media posts that sometimes make me angry, sometimes makes me laugh. Before that, you were Noah's mom. But now you are simply Brandy. So Brandy, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. So first of all, how are things in Israel?
Good. Everything's going well. Getting to put my toes in the sand and feet in the Mediterranean, which is always nice in the summertime.
Oh, yeah. I am super jealous. People complain about Israel in the summer, saying, oh, it's so hot. It's so hot. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? I usually go when it's so rainy, so cold. So I would rather be there definitely in the summer. So one of the things that caught my eye on your bio, because I actually have somewhat of a connection to that in my previous life, in that I was a SANE nurse. I believe that's what they call it in the United States.
Yes.
And for those who don't know, it's sexual assault nurse examiner. And I see that you do work in that area. Can you tell me what led you to focus on that field? Because it's not an easy field to focus on, for one thing. And just tell me what brought you there, and tell me a little bit about the work that you do.
Sure. When I was actually studying in grad school many years ago, I was actually pregnant with Noah. I got a part-time opportunity at the YWCA of Honolulu, and I worked with victims of domestic violence, helping them more through legal proceedings, obtain restraining orders, protective orders, through any type of child support, child custody issues, and safety planning. And that's actually what brought me into the field of social services and social work. It was a long time ago. We were living in Hawaii at the time. When we moved back to the mainland and we were living in San Diego, California, I ended up taking a similar position, but within the military community. So I started working not just with victims and survivors of domestic violence, but also of sexual assault, and worked very closely with a lot of wonderful SANE nurses. What you do is so needed and so difficult. Mm-hmm. And I think that having people there to work with individuals that have gone through such trauma, that can exhibit empathy and professionalism, and that very fine balance is good work. It's necessary work.
Absolutely. And why in particular the military setting? I'm a little curious about that.
Sure. My husband is retired Navy, so I actually started working with a community that I was very familiar with because I was part of it on a personal side. That's really the only reason. When I initially entered the field, when I was at the YWCA, I was working with civilians, which I've done since, but most of my work in that field has been with the military community.
Okay, awesome, because it is good work and it's challenging work, but it's so important. So now you are currently focusing. Let me take it back a step. What was because you recently became a PhD, and can I tell you, I felt this overwhelming feeling of pride when I saw that posting. I was like, you go, girl. Like, I was just well, yes, doctor. So I really was. Because it's something that I think we as a community, not just, people of color, but women, we need to see role models like you. And I was I was overwhelmed with joy. I really was, because it's like,
Thank you.
great, you are a shining example of the importance of education and the importance of making those moves. So what I would like to know is, what did you focus on? And as far as your thesis, share with us what you did.
Yeah, I did. My focus of my dissertation was exploring the lived experiences of MENA Jews through a digital storytelling approach. So I had 3 brilliant participants sit with me, not in person because it was during COVID, actually similar like this on Zoom, and they allowed me to record their stories, the stories of their and experiences of their families, of people who hold very specific identity, and stories and experiences that are really not well and known and widely shared. Stories of triumph and of course, heartbreak and trauma, but in a very, very personal, intimate manner. And I wanted to focus on that group of people, which are very, very diverse. And my participants were very diverse, different, with different experiences. But specifically because looking at what happens when a certain group of people are either explicitly or implicitly erased from a narrative and story.
That is powerful, because it is something that, I've noticed is we hear a lot about the Eastern European story. We hear about the Holocaust. We hear a little bit about the expulsions from Spain and Portugal, but we really don't hear enough about the stories of our brothers and sisters in the Middle East and what they went through. We may hear the narrative of when they talk about, the Nakba, for example, when they talk about Palestinians being, and I'm saying this is the quotation, expelled from Israel, not recognizing, but hold up, we have a whole story ourselves. So can you share some of what you found out in these conversations?
Sure. A lot of the kind of foundational information that I think was necessary to discover and to share that is centered around the idea of Zionism and just being self-determination of a people and Israel's right to exist. And the real, I don't know if it's just willful ignorance from other people or if it's purposeful erasure of the idea that without the state of Israel, hundreds of thousands, millions of people would not be here today because they had nowhere else to go when they were expelled from these lands. And really centering that idea, that historical fact in my research was really important to me. One of the things that I found out that I hadn't been aware of until I started doing some of this research was the fact that there were actual concentration camps, death camps in places outside of Europe. In North Africa, the type of close collaboration that the pan-Arab leaders of the time had with the Nazi Party that just isn't discussed, that the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem is meeting with Hitler face to face to discuss how he can start establishing that type of genocidal terror to the Jews here in the Middle East, in North Africa.
I almost have no words. Yeah, I almost have no words, because that is the narrative that we hear about, is that the Holocaust, for example, was very specific to Jews in Europe, and that concentration camps very specific to Europe, and in particular located primarily in Poland, and we hear that. So can you elaborate more on the concentration camps in North Africa? I'm a bit gobsmacked, actually.
Well, it's very similar to when we talk about World War II as a whole. We don't discuss what happened in what were colonial lands, so under British control or French control or German control outside of Germany. So looking at Libya, for example, which was under the control of France. Well, France fell to the Nazis, so a Vichy French regime came in and had camps set up, had started to establish similar type, either strictly death camps or work camps, to put their Jewish population in Libya in to eliminate them. And then what happened in the aftermath, and just kind of expanding on the idea of the Holocaust that happened like in Europe was specific, and it was specific to Europe, and
Yes.
it was also generalized to the Jewish community as a whole globally. And a lot of it is because the war didn't just happen in Europe. It happened, we know, in the Pacific, and it happened
Yes.
in North Africa and in the Middle East. And looking at the aftermath of that, what happened afterwards. And I think that the idea, one of the interesting things that I discovered is the idea that the issue with the Arabs and the Israeli Arabs and Arabs in this region now only and Jewish people in this region now only started occurring after the establishment of the modern state of Israel in 1948 ignores all of the pogroms, all of the clashes, all of the attempted ethnic cleansing of Jews from this region that predate the reestablishment of the state of Israel in 1948.
Exactly.
Kind of telling the whole story. The history of the Jewish people doesn't start with World War II or with 1948. It predates that. But when we have a conversation about Jewish identity or Zionism or the state of Israel or the Palestinians, we only go back so far and just ignore all of a big, huge chunk, majority, in fact, of history.
Absolutely. Well, I need to get a copy of your dissertation, Brandy. No, really. One of the things where I work for a synagogue. And one of the things we do every year is, as most synagogues do, is there's Holocaust Education Week, and we do some education around the Holocaust. We, for our Yizkor book, we have stories from the Holocaust. And I'm telling you, just listening to you now, I'm thinking to myself, maybe this is the year that we tell the stories from MENA Jews.
Yeah.
I think this sounds like this is the year it needs to start. So I thank you for that. And I also clocked that you use the same terminology I use in terms of Israel. I never say the establishment of the state of Israel. I always say the re-establishment of the state of Israel, because words matter.
Yes.
Words matter. And like you just articulated, when you use certain words, it ignores the before.
Right.
When you say reestablishment, it acknowledges the before and the history, because we know it's a long history and it needs to be recognized. So you have a love of Israel. It is clear. You're sitting up in there now. So So it's very clear to me. It's very clear to me in the work that in your work that I've read. I sometimes kind of stalk your Twitter feed and check out what's going on. So I would like you to talk to us about some of the challenges that you faced when you are on social media, putting out the Zionist pro-Israel voice, and some of the challenges and some of the themes that you are coming across, especially as a person of color.
Yeah. I don't, like, on social media, I don't have too many issues, because usually I'm not, don't feed the trolls. I don't go back and forth with people in comments. I don't get involved in that. I don't have the bandwidth and patience for all
I hear you. Because that can suck your soul, actually. And then you're like, an hour later, you're like, seriously?
Yeah.
How did I let this happen? Anyways, continue.
Very true. The underlying theme is just historical inaccuracies. I'm baffled and disheartened by the level of lies that are just spewed everywhere. There's a space to obviously debate policies. And then which is fine if we were doing that. Unfortunately, what's happening is just lies being spewed. And I think that getting away from the idea of Zionism being one of the most successful indigenous rights movements in modern time to, I'm an anti-Zionist because I don't like Netanyahu. Like, that's just a nonsense argument. That overcoming that type of those types of falsehoods, I think, is probably the biggest hurdle and challenge that I've seen, because there's so many.
Yeah.
And so prevalent.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you find our online Jewish brothers and sisters? Do you find it more of a challenge to combat that kind of ignorance among what's the word I'm looking for? Do you find it more challenging among our own Jewish brothers and sisters to challenge those falsehoods? And if so, like, how do you navigate that?
I mean, I think that truth can always overcome lies. The people that I'm connected to, fellow Jews, fellow Zionists, have been doing the work to overcome lies and doing it quite well. I think that one of the things that maybe is, and this is a more of a cynical take, but one of the things that I think maybe we're grappling with as a community is at a certain point, the realization that they don't care if it's lies. You know, there's a level and a layer of anti-Semitism and just Jew hatred that will take any lie, any conspiracy, any trope and latch onto it as long as it gives them an excuse to demonize the state of Israel or to hate Jews. And that's something that I don't really know how it would be overcome. Like just blatant hatred isn't something that can be educated out of. Ignorance can, and
Yes.
you know, I'm not expecting everybody to know everything. So that's great when we can have conversation and somebody's like, you know, I didn't know that. Perfect. You know, none of us know everything. But when it's really just an excuse to engage in Jew hatred, that's a whole different issue to tackle. And I think that that's where we're at.
The last major conflict, because in my opinion it's ongoing conflict, but in the last major conflict really for me said, even though I think I always knew this, for me it said it's hatred, because it's, if I give you fact and you still choose to disregard that fact, or you say yeah whatever, but then I'm dealing with something else and I can't fix your hate. You can fix your hate. And all I can do at this point is protect myself from your hate. And sadly, in some cases, protect myself physically from your hate. Physically, sadly, but also emotionally, spiritually, whatever. I just have to protect myself from you because I'm not going to fix you. Only you can fix you. You define yourself. Do you define yourself as, in your views, as liberal? Or does it ebb and flow? Or
no, I mean, I think that the core of my beliefs are liberal democratic values. I've been what would have been before considered a liberal Democrat in the United States of America. I don't know in current terms how I would define myself, because where the people who self-define as liberal Democrats or democratic socialists or whatever any of that is doesn't align with liberalism. But it doesn't align with my political views. I'm very socially liberal. I'm also, hawkish when it comes to national security and also just self-defense and doing what's right. So I've never been liberal where I am a pacifist. I'm not, never have been, probably never will be. But as far as social values, I've always been liberal.
Yeah, it is interesting, even in asking that question, how it feels like even more, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel especially, well, it's a little bit in Canada too. It's getting there also, but in my feeling is in the United States, people are being really forced to define themselves in these strict margins and to almost pigeonhole themselves. Even as I was asking you that question, I don't know if you noticed, I kind of hesitated because I was like, what does that mean? Do I have to break it down and say, do I mean big D Democrat, small D Democrat? Do I mean, it's like, yeah, it's almost, and it's almost at the point where you're almost afraid to say what you are in some settings because of what the perception may be. Like, am I wrong, or is that how we're moving to?
I feel like we've moved there. I can say, when I self-define as a liberal Democrat, I can say that proudly because I know what liberal democratic values are. And they value individualism and agency and also community responsibility. It's not as narrow, or traditionally hasn't been as narrow as how it seems in current events and current times. So I think that there's a lot of times, you get told, well, if you're a Zionist, then you have to be a right wing and only vote for Republicans because of A, B, and C. Or if you're a liberal, then you have to be this and only vote for these types of Democrats because of A, B, and C. And I don't buy into that. I think that it's just not the reality that we're in. I think that people and politics, because of people, are more complex than that. I think that that's important to stick to the idea that we're more complex than that, not try to dumb it down, because that gets into dangerous ideology where you have groupthink and you have purges of people because they don't line up completely 100% perfectly with one very narrow platform.
Right. And I think we are seeing that, and we have seen that. And, you know, it's funny, I'm a lurker on social media. I used to be super active, like on Twitter. I was a lunatic, but we're talking years ago, lunatic, to the point where when I went on it last year, I had to purge some people because I was like, oh, based on my lunacy from years ago, you think I am this sort of person, and I can't. No, please don't follow me. I was like, oh no, that is actually not me. I was just caught up in stuff, so I just tend to be more of a lurker. But I one time, maybe 4 years ago, posted a message on my Facebook page, because my Facebook page, in case you haven't noticed, is basically on lockdown. I don't have a lot of personal stuff there. I don't really, every now and then I post something goofy, maybe. When I do post something political, I instantly regret it, because then on one hand I instantly regret it because then I got to monitor my page, which is not what I set it up to have to do. But then I'm also grateful because then I delete people, including those I know in real life, because their crap has shown up on my page. So it's like, oh, you really are a bleep and bleep. Delete and block. But I remember one time I asked the community what they thought I was politically, just based on my posts, based on whatever, right? Whatever they could see. And it was interesting. No one could really figure it out because it was so neutral. And I kind of leave it that way because sometimes I feel if I do identify as that, just like you said, there is going to be this perception where they're going to try and like say, okay, if she says, like you said, if she says she's Zionist, then she must be this, that, and the other. And, she must hang out, she must have a picture of Kahana on her wall, and she must be this, and she must be that. And it's like, I can be this without having all those other things, just like you said, So I think, Brandy, it's a really tricky waters that we are trying to wade through and tread through and swim through these days as Jews. Now, as Jews of color, let's get on to that. So you are Jewish, raising Jews of color. And, I have to say, based on what your son has said, I was like, your parents, they got it together. I was like, dang. So how was it? Because, we hear from, I'll talk about my experiences, being a Jew of color. We don't often talk about Jews of color raising Jews of color, if you know what I'm saying. Jewish moms, it's almost a tongue twister for me. And let me try this again. Let me try and get a hold of the Queen's English. Mothers who are Jews of color raising Jews of color. Sometimes I think it's a different road we walk. So share a little bit about that path that you walked.
So we have 4 beautiful, wild, smart kids. And we're only Jews of color in America. In Israel, we're just Jews.
Yep.
And I think that I grapple with the terminology because I know that where half of our people live, that's not a thing. But I'm an American and grew up in America and raised my children in America. I think that one of the underlying values that my husband, myself, we're raising them to hold is to be unapologetic. This is what you are. There isn't oh, I'm sorry that I'm this, and you may feel uncomfortable because this is my identity. There's none of that. This is who we are. And because we are this, these are some of the things you're going to be faced with. I've told my kids since they were little, you guys are Black Russian Jews. Everybody will hate you. Buckle up. Don't hate yourselves.
Dang.
I have, but it's true. The ideas that in all 3 of those identities, the thoughts that they inspire in others are usually, some good, but they come with a lot of bad, a lot of bad misconceptions or preconceived notions of what that means with those identities. And my kids hold all 3. So I don't, they've always been able to hold their heads high, and sometimes their feelings have gotten hurt, when they're little and they get told, oh, well, I can't play with you, or I don't want to play with you because of X, Y, and Z, and it's all related to their identity. And that's fine. They're human, we're human. It's fine for feelings to get hurt, to acknowledge, that's horrible, my feelings are hurt. And that doesn't mean that I should be any less proud of who I am and what I am.
Exactly. So when they have come home with that negativity, that hurt, can you give me an example of a time that happened and how you kind of, navigated through it?
Sure. With Noah, when he was really little, he may have been kindergarten, first grade. A little boy, a fellow classmate, told him that Noah couldn't come to his birthday party because he didn't believe in the baby Jesus. And Noah, his reaction, even though he's very level-headed and calm, he's a Scorpio. So he has his little temper, and he's like,
I'm a Scorpio, easy on Scorpios.
Oh no, I'm not saying it in a bad way.
Because people usually do. Because people, they usually go, oh, Scorpio. Anyways, yay, Scorpio.
There's a fire to Scorpio.
Yay, Scorpio.
Me, it's all good.
Continue.
But because he actually didn't come home in tears about it, he was angry. But he also was prepared, and he was very young, but he was prepared very young. That's one example. Our daughter, who will be 9 in a couple of weeks, is very fair, straight blonde hair, green eyes. To anyone who's just looking at her thinking of color, they assume that she's white. They definitely don't assume that she's Black. She was in, again, also kindergarten, maybe first grade. And one of her classmates, they were sitting at their table doing whatever. It's like, people with our skin color are white. And my daughter's like, no, I'm Black. And they had this back and forth. No, you're not. Yes, I am. And so I actually went and I had to speak with her teacher and let her know, one, that if a little kid that young is hearing that, they're repeating something.
100%.
I mean, there's something that they're hearing at home, which I told Hannah as well. And then explaining the idea of colorism and the history of that, at least in the context of the United States, and what that means and why people may assume that about her, especially when she's with me and people don't assume that we're mother-daughter. And I think that for my approach to that is really just explaining to them the way of the world, because it's going to be something that she encounters in certain spaces. Again, we're only Jews of color over there. Over here,
yes,
we're just Jews. And it's interesting because sometimes I'm like, I wish people would recognize that I'm American because I don't speak Hebrew. And everybody keeps coming up to me speaking Hebrew. I'm like,
especially if the worst for me is when they do come up and they say, Boker Tov, and I say, oh, Boker Tov, mein Yanim. And then I think to myself, oh no, I think I've given them the impression that I'm going to continue on in Hebrew. What was I thinking? But it's a happy problem.
Yes.
It's a happy problem. You struck a chord with me, because we are both mothers of biracial children. And one of my children also, on the surface, especially when he was younger, appears to be white. So I remember even in the hospital, one of the nurses just kept walking in and out and looking at him, looking at me, and I knew, I was like, oh, here we go. And so those questions, and what it culminated in, Joshua got it a lot, when they would meet his friends. One time I went to his school and they were all hanging out outside, and I said something to Joshua and I left, and it was probably grade 2 or something like that. And when he came home, he's laughing. And I said, what's up? He said, oh, when you came to the school, they were like, who's that? Who's that? And he goes, oh, that's my mom. Yeah, but she's Black. Like, it's just like, and I was like, and Josh, he was just like, whatever. I said, no, but she's my mom. And they let it go. Mm-hmm. But interestingly enough, when they were, I can't even remember what age. I'm getting old, my memory. It's like one big age. But anyways, I can't remember what age. They were having an argument. My daughter and my son were having an argument, and I could hear them. So Shelby is like, oh, you're white because you sound white. You look white. You're white. I'm not. I'm Black because I look Black. I sound Black. And my friend, and it was going back and forth. And I remember sitting there going, this cannot be happening in my house. Mm-hmm. And so Joshua comes in and he's like, Mom, Shelby says, and I was like, okay, first of all, you have the same parents. Let's just start there. Let's just start there. And I don't know, I don't know what talking Black is. I don't know what acting white is. I don't know what that is. but I can tell you, so we had to have that conversation.
Mhm.
I wish I'd started younger like you did with yours. Because it was a disturbing conversation to have. I wish I'd gotten it over with. But speaking of disturbing conversation, you are raising, I know they're not in the United States currently, but especially you're too older, correct?
Correct.
So you're raising Black men in the United States of America. How has that affected you as the mother of Black men?
I think that the fears I have for it's interesting because my older two are here in Israel. My oldest is a lone soldier. He's serving in the IDF. He's made Aliyah. He's going to be here. He's not leaving. Noah's in the process of making Aliyah, so he's still back and forth because visa stuff. And whenever they come here, like come to Israel, family, friends, oh, tell them to be safe. Tell them to be safe. And I'm like, dude, we're from the U.S. They're safer over there. When they're here, I don't worry about them. I don't, even with any type of conflict or war or terror, I don't worry about them the same way when they're in Israel versus when they're in the US. And the idea of just the level of violence in the United States as a whole, let alone directed towards young Black boys or men, is something that isn't normal. It's not normal to feel this level of anxiety or fear when your kid or your son or your daughter steps outside of your home with their driver's license, insurance, car registered, and running to go meet their friends or running to go, drive through Starbucks or something to get me a latte. The level of it's not normal. In realizing that, as somebody from the United States, I think that enough of us don't realize that worry it's not normal. It may have become normalized because it's so common, but it's not normal. And for Noah and Dimitri, and I tell them all the time, go have fun. I don't keep that I think that they need to explore without fear, but with awareness. So when they go hang out with their friends, I'm like, just shoot me a text when you get there and shoot me a text when you're leaving, because I want to time it. I know it takes you 30 minutes to get so-and-so. So if you're not back in 30 minutes, I'm going to think, okay, something may be wrong. But also don't feel like you have to live like you're a prisoner, because you're not. And I think it's just that balance. But I mean, all it's done is give me gray hair. Yeah.
Wow. And it's a sad commentary on the US of A when you said that when they're in Israel, you don't worry, but in the United States, you worry. And I'm even as you're saying it, I'm kind of getting chills because I'm trying to process that. We don't have that. We have a level of worry in Canada. It is not at that same level, obviously. But I know one time when the news there was more and more news about, and this is pre-George Floyd, more and more news about young Black men being shot while sitting in their car, being shot while reading a book, being shot by just being Black. And I remember saying to my son, do me a favor. And I said, because I don't ask much of him as an adult male. I don't ask a lot of him, but I said, I am asking this, and this is non-negotiable. Do not go to the United States.
Yeah.
And he was like, what do you mean? I said, do not go to the United States, full stop. Your Canadian citizenship will not save you. I said, all it will do is make it an international incident. I said, your perceived complexion will not save you. You are a Black man. You are a Black man, full stop. And so please, and I made him promise. I made him promise not to go to the United States. Never thought I'd ever have to say that.
And he's like hearing it and saying it out loud. It sounds ridiculous, right?
Doesn't it?
It sounds absolutely ridiculous, but it's true. And I think that the idea of thinking of, so my youngest son is, he's 12, and thinking for him, I'm like, he can't go to college here, like in the US, not here.
Yes.
I have having our oldest two attend university in the United States is stressful enough. I can't imagine our youngest two going to university in the United States of America. And it's not that I expect that other places they're not going to encounter racism or bigotry. That's the way of the world. It shouldn't be deadly.
Exactly.
And that is a very real difference when in the context of the United States versus somewhere else. It shouldn't be deadly. And not that it's okay in any other context, but
no, but I know what you're saying. You shouldn't lose your life. You shouldn't
Right.
lose your life. You know, my only concern should be that if, you know, my son's called the N-word, not if he's shot in the head by a police officer.
Right.
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 So, do you think your entire family will make Aliyah, Brandy? Because I feel it kind of coming, but yeah. I know you love to travel, period, because I've looked with envy. I'm like, where is she now? What is happening with this family? Can I join them? Like,
yes.
But seriously, what are your plans in terms of Israel? Because you do go back and forth. You do spend chunks of time there. You, like you said, you have one son who's a lone soldier, and which I think is freaking amazing. And it really speaks to the love of Israel that you've imparted in your children. You have Noah, who is there working on his music, making his plans to, you know, never shall he return to the US of A except to say, hey, and that's it. So what about the rest of y'all? When are y'all going? For good?
I mean, in the process, and to me, nothing's ever for good. I can't imagine sitting still in one place. I can't. I mean, I spent over 20 years married to a service member, so we traveled all. You know,
that's
lived
right.
Around. So I'm like, I get wanderlust.
Oh, I forgot. You're a wandering Jew. But anyway, so
yes.
so when do you think?
We're actually, our paperwork is in the process right now. So we're working, which is a slow process, and obviously slowed down because of COVID, and getting apostilles and getting official copies of everything. And then my husband was born in the former Soviet Union, so getting his birth certificate, all those records. It's just
his part will probably be more challenging than yours.
Yeah,
like seriously.
Sure. But we're actually in the process of that right now, and we're in. You know, we rented an apartment in Hadera last year. That's where I am right now, and I love it here.
Oh, Israel is, I try and be tactful and respectful of the country I'm born in, but like, I gotta say, Israel's like my favorite place. It really is. I don't think, you know, you mentioned how even Jews of color, that you're right. When I go to Israel, I'm just a Jew. The most exciting thing about me in their mind is that I'm Canadian, and I don't even know how they think that's exciting. But then when I mentioned the Jamaican background, they're like, oh, Bob Marley. I'm like, yeah, Bob Marley, not related. You know, so, but there is this beautiful sense of comfort. So, you know, but having said that, I've noticed, you know, on social media that people try, and including our fellow Jews of color, try to paint Israel in a particular, well, not even with a racist paintbrush. You know, people say, oh, I'm not going to Israel because they're racist. And these are Jews of color. Say, oh, I'm not going to Israel because they're racist. Or look at what they do to this group and that group. And, oh, no, I'm sure I'll have problems. And it goes on and on. How would you address that as somebody who's spent a good chunk of time?
I would tell them, come and see. And that's also acknowledging that there are, I don't even know if you call it racism, because it's like inter-community, color-based conflict and tension. It's not that doesn't exist here, but it's not the same. And what I've found is a lot of people, at least in the US, look at it from a very US American centric lens, and you can't export that here. It doesn't work. It doesn't apply. And the only time I hear people saying that is when they haven't actually spent time here, and not just, I'm going to go to Israel and just stay in Tel Aviv, like in the entirety of the country, because the diversity and the complexity of this place is something that can't be shrunken down and defined in American centric terms, racial terms, and color-based terms. It doesn't work. And yes, there's a history of a lot of color-based discrimination and diaspora-based discrimination that occurred here. That's not erasing that, and some of it still occurs. I don't think that's that I would even try to attempt to deny that, especially coming as an outsider. I'm not going to deny people's experiences. They've experienced a lot of discrimination And it's not the same. It's not even like, oh, it's better, or oh, it's not, it's worse in the US. It's just not the same.
Okay.
It's not this country does not have the same history as the United States of America.
Right, right. You said an interesting thing, diaspora based. Elaborate on that.
So looking at where people, this is a country of returnees. So you have people that their communities spent how many centuries or generations in the diaspora. So if they were in the diaspora in Ethiopia and finally returned home as returnees, their experience isn't going to necessarily be the same as people who were part of the diaspora in Poland and they returned to the homeland. It's different. And there's a lot of discrimination and misunderstanding because those generations spent outside of the land impacted culture and influenced things, anything from food to language to level of religious practice to et cetera, to accent.
Yeah.
So of course there's been usually when you bring people together and there's any difference, there's going to be tension.
Yes.
And that has occurred here. And some of it is small micro level tension, some of it's macro level tension that the country's still overcoming. And I wouldn't be true and honest to the experience and stories of so many people if I ignored that.
Right.
And it's nowhere near I'm going to come here and just immediately face race-based discrimination because somebody's going to look at me as a Black woman and treat me so poorly. That just isn't, it's just not like what happens in the United States.
So I'm going to ask a really loaded question, and it will never be fully explored in one podcast, but I need to ask. You're in Israel. You have a lone soldier son, a potential another lone soldier son. I'm not going to say you'll have two more lone soldiers because you all will be living there. So it won't be lone soldiers. They will just be doing their service. But, one of the things that comes up inevitably when we talk about Israel, it's not the food. It's not Tel Aviv. It's not Eilat. It is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I just want you, if you wouldn't mind, sharing a bit of your views around that. Your views as Brandy around that, living in the land, being so involved in writing about the topic, writing about Israel, writing about Zionism, and so on. So I'd like you to share with us, what are your views? Do you see any, and people can't see me, but I'm doing quotation marks, peace? What do you see?
I think that on an individual human level, it's possible. I think on a political level, it's so ridiculously complicated that I don't know if any type of real, like you said, peace would happen on a governmental level in my lifetime, only because of the complications. There is a very large segment of the international community that is benefiting from this conflict continuing. The idea of keeping,
hold that thought. Say that again. Elaborate on the benefiting.
Okay, so the idea of passing down refugee status to only this small, teeny tiny group of people in the global context is not, if that continues, why would there ever be peace? Other countries surrounding Israel that have a Palestinian refugee population, and I'm saying that in quotes, get money to keep them as refugees. They get money for not having those population groups become citizens of the nations that they've been hosted in for generations. So why would there be, if there was any type of, for example, a two-state solution, and those populations that are deemed refugees right now by the international community were patriated to their new homeland, those nation states would lose a lot of money that they're getting from the international community. That's one example.
Okay.
The other one is the idea of just geography. I'm originally from California. This country, this land is teeny. And I don't know if people can really grasp how small it is geographically. Yeah. And when you think about having defensible borders, when you have a segment of the Palestinian population in this region, in Gaza, who elected a terrorist organization to be their political representatives, there's no making peace with that. And this is me speaking as Brandy.
Yes.
I'm an old school American. There's no negotiating with terrorists. So how do you negotiate with that? It just can't occur.
I'm not American, but I'm still old school that way.
We
do not negotiate with terrorists.
And also, how would there ever be a negotiation when one group is saying we want everything and to kill you all, and the other group is saying we want to not be killed?
True.
And like, there are very hard realities, and until we actually address that, I don't know how we get to peace. Now, on an individual level, Jews and Arabs have been living here, and sometimes in conflict and sometimes in peace, like any other two distinct groups that live next to each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think we don't really appreciate and recognize that and understand that as not just as Jewish people, as global people, period, that exactly, we have lived in peace and sometimes with conflict, and is exactly how you've said it, just like any other country, groups of people, period. It is a very challenging topic. It is because there is just so many factors. We can try and boil it down to black and white, but there's so many emotions and so much more involved in it that it is virtually, I agree with you. I think in my lifetime, not so much. I don't even know if it may be in my grandchildren's lifetime. And even still, I'm not putting any money on it. I'm keeping my money. I'm putting any money on it, keeping my money, because I'll need it when I move to Israel. On a light note, what is your favorite part of Israel? And don't you dare say Hadera, because that's cheating.
I don't know. I mean, the last year we were here for 4 months. That was my first time being in Israel, and I mean, half of that's on
really.
Yeah, so this is my second time here, and we're here for an extended time. It's not short trips, but it's also during COVID. So the thing, I've been to a few places, rent a car, and we could be alone, not like taking public transport. We could be COVID safe and see things, but so many things weren't open last year, and this year I'm just readjusting to throwing off the jet lag. So
the jet lag's the worst.
Yeah, it was really bad for me this time. This is, I think, the worst I've ever been jet lagged. But I think being here and realizing how dedicated people are to living in a place that's just very harsh. It's hard to live here, and seeing the love that people have for their land, for their country, for their traditions, for all of that is one of the most beautiful things I love about being here. And we're gonna, as soon as we finish our isolation, quarantine and stuff, rent a car and go to Jerusalem and explore that more, because I haven't.
Nice.
And our oldest two are always like, oh, you have to go here, and they're going to drag us all over the place. So we'll probably
that'll be fantastic.
It'll be great. Yeah. But I think that just there's just something different to me about actually being here and being any place that the ancestors walked.
Yeah, the ancestors. Exactly. Well, enjoy again. So envious. I'm living vicariously through you. But I know one day, God willing, we too shall meet. Whether it's, well, it won't be in the United States. Sorry, girl, it won't be in the US.
I'll come to Canada.
Yeah,
did they reopen the border?
Apparently they did, because there was I saw pictures, and it was a zoo, a madhouse of people frantically crossing over into Canada. I guess some expats and other people are like, hey man, my cottage is up there. I haven't seen it in 2 years. Those people, and made me think, oh dear. But yeah,
we're invading. Oh my goodness.
Oh no, it is happening. They're trying to take us over. But no, but no, seriousness, absolutely. You come to me. You can come up north on the lake, and we can hang out. I am not taking you to any of the cities, so don't even hope for that. But barring that, we will meet in Israel. And we'll take off, and we'll see it from top to bottom, and we'll just have a blast.
Sounds so great.
And we might include your kids too. We'll see.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe. We'll see. But Brandy, I thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this moment for quite some time, and I am just thrilled. I also have in the back of my head that I want to do a Shufutinsky family podcast. I totally do. Totally do. And, but I shall wait, because I think I have to wait until your son is out of army. And then absolutely. So
that sounds amazing.
Keep some space for me. Okay.
All right.
So thank you. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast today. And we'll catch up. I'll be lurking on your pages.
Sounds great. Thank you. Thank you. This is
Thank
great.
you. Awesome. Thanks for listening to Rivkush. Our producer is Michael Freeman, music by Westside Gravy, and I am Rivka Campbell. You can find us at the CJN or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe, tell a friend, share, keep the good news going, and definitely leave a review. Thanks for listening.
It's time we talk about more than just the tragedy, the hardships we've overcome and the savagery. It's time we focus on what's woven in the tapestry, the roots that connect us to our truth and the canopy of every single branch of our tradition. The story that's been told and those yet to be written. A tale of persistence, an account of achievement. All across the globe, every single place that them leaves went. Scattered in the wind, never scattered too thin. To remember where we come from and the goal that's within. Zahav Yerushalayim, Asur Lishkoach, Hakdushat Haaretz, Shenoten Lanu Koach. Scattered in the wind, never scattered too thin. To remember where we come from and the goal that's within.